Treasure Hunters by James Patterson and Chris Gravenstein.
Treasure Hunters by James Patterson and Chris Gravenstein, with Mark Schulman, illustrated by Juliana Neufeld. For Owen Ellington Peitsch, J.P.
A quick note from Big Kid. Just so you know, I'm the one who'll be telling you the story about my twin sister Beck, who's wickedly talented and should go to art school should go to art school or show her stuff in a museum or something. We'll be doing the drawings, like this one. I'm telling you this up front because even though we're twins, Beck and I don't always see everything exactly the same way. For instance, I don't look like the way she drew me. I'm 12. I don't have a mustache or an eye patch. So don't believe everything you see. Fine. Beck says I should tell you not to believe everything I say either. Whatever. Can we get into the story? Good. Hang on tight. Things already get very hairy and wet. Very, very wet.
Prologue, Lost at Sea. Chapter 1. Let me tell you about the last time I saw my dad. We were up on deck, rigging our ship to ride out what looked like a perfect storm. Well, it was perfect if you were the storm. Not so much if you were the people being tossed around the deck like wet gym socks in a washing machine. We'd just finished taking down and tying off the sails so we could run on bare poles. Lash off the wheel, my dad barked to my big brother, Tailspin Tommy. Steer her leeward and lock it down. On it! Tommy yanked the wheel hard and pointed our bow downwind. He looped a bungee cord through the wheel's wooden spokes to keep us headed in that direction. Now get below, boys. Batten down the hatches. Help your sisters man the pumps. Tommy grabbed hold of whatever he could to steady himself and made his way down into the deckhouse cabin. Just then, a monster wave lurched over the starboard side of the ship and swept me off my feet. I slid across the slick deck like a hockey puck on ice. I might have gotten overboard if my dad hadn't reached down and grabbed me a half second before I became shark bait. Time to head downstairs, Bick, my dad shouted in the raging storm as rain slashed across his face. No, I shouted back. I want to stay up here and help you. You can help me more by staying alive and not letting the Lost go under. Now hurry, get below. But, go. He gave me a gentle shove to propel me into the tilting deck. When I reached the deck house, I grabbed onto a handhold and swung myself around and through the door. Tommy had already headed down to the engine room to help with the bilge pumps. Suddenly, a giant sledgehammer of salt water slammed into our starboard side and sent the ship tipping wildly to the left. I heard wood creaking. We tilted over so far I fell against the wall while our port side slammed against the churning sea. We were going to capsize. I could tell. But the Lost righted itself instead, the ship tossing and buckling like a very angry beached whale. I found the floor and shoved the deckhouse hatch shut. I had to press my body against it. Waves kept pounding against the door. The water definitely wanted me to let it in. That wasn't going to happen. Not on my watch. I cranked the door's latch to bolt it tight. I would, of course, reopen the door the instant my dad finished doing whatever else needed to be done up on deck and made his way aft to the cabin. But now I had to stop the Lost from taking on any more water, if that was even possible. The sea kept churning. The Lost kept lurching. The storm kept sloshing seawater through every crack and crevice it could find. Me? I started panicking. Because I had a sinking feeling, as in, we're gonna sink, that this is gonna be the end. I was about to be drowned at sea. Is 12 years old too young to die? Apparently, the Caribbean Sea didn't think so.
Chapter 2. I waited and waited. My dad never made it after the deckhouse cabin door. Through the forward windows, I could see waves crashing across our bobbing bow. I could see the sky growing even darker. I could see a life preserver rip free from its rope and fly off the ship like a donut-shaped frisbee. But I couldn't see Dad. I suddenly realized that my socks were soaked with seawater that was slopping across the floor. And I was up on the main deck. Yikes! Beck, I cried out, Tommy, Storm. My sisters and brother were all down in the lower cabins and equipment rooms, where the waterhead was undoubtedly deeper. They were trapped down there. Creak, thud, bang, crash, slosh, gurgle. I dashed down the four steep steps into the hull quarters as quickly as I could. The water was up to my ankles, then my knees, then my thighs, and finally my waist. You ever try to run across a shallow end of a swimming pool? That's what I was up against, but I had to find my family. Well, what was left of it, of course. I tried from door to door, frantically searching for my siblings. They weren't in the engine room, the galley, or my parents' cabin. I knew they couldn't be in the room because its solid steel door was locked tight and it was totally off limits to all of us. I slogged my way forward as the ship kept rocking and rolling from side to side. Whatever wasn't nailed down was stomping around inside the cupboards and cabinets. I heard cans of food banging into plastic dishes that were knocking over the clinking coffee mugs. I started pounding on the wall in the narrow corridor with both fists. The water was up to my chest. Hey, you guys! Tommy, Beck, Storm, where are you? No answer. Of course, my brothers and sisters probably couldn't hear me because the tropical storm outside was screaming even louder than I was. Suddenly, up ahead, a door burst open. Tommy, who was 17, had the kind of bulging muscles you only get from crewing on a sail ship your entire life, had just put his shoulders to the wood to bash it open. Where's Dad? He shouted. I don't know, I shouted back. That's when Beck and my big sister Storm trudged out of the cabin. It was now their waterlogged bedroom. A pair of 3D glasses was floating on the surface of the water. Beck plucked them up and put them on. She'd been wearing them most of the time ever since our mom disappeared. I've had better hair days. Was that on a safety line? Asked Storm, sounding as scared and worried as I felt. All I could do was shake my head. Beth looked at me, and even though her 3D glasses were shading her eyes, I could tell she was thinking the same thing that I was. We're twins, it happens. In our hearts, we both knew that Dad was gone, because anything up on dock that hadn't been tied down had been washed overboard by now. From the sad expressions on their faces, I knew Storm and Tommy had figured it out too. Maybe they'd be looking. Maybe they'd been looking out a porthole when the life preserver went flying by. Shivering slightly, we all moved together to form a close circle and hug one another tight. Four of us were the only family we had left. Tommy had been living on boat longer than any of us, started mumbling an old sailor's prayer. Though death waits off the bow, we'll not answer to him now. I hoped he was right, but I had a feeling that death might not take no for an answer. The end. Dun, 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 dun. In the next video, we will be reading part 1, Pirate-Infested Waters. As always, thanks for listening and watching. Haha.